Also tonight over the weekend during a town hall in Berlin in Germany, former President Barack Obama said he was concerned that progressives are risking going after each other in a brutal primary in what he called a, quote, circular firing squad. But the Democratic Party, well, it was not his favorite topic. According to the Washington Examiner, Obama referred to himself almost 400 times during this one speech. Here are just a few examples, but for the benefit of time, we can't give up the whole show to him referring to him. Take a look.
Probably the biggest impact I could have, I was also convinced of there's only one of me, and I believe I could not have been. I'm not here to support any political party. I've held my last political office, but I'm deeply invested. I'm assuming, I always used to say, I think you can. Actually, I'm not sure. Am I correct about that?
I wanted to hide. I've got to take it, and I was elected. I can give you a little bit of this. I've been on both sides when I helped. I was the first I can get, I think, I'll be able to, I'm not going to, I know from experience, that's what I'm going to do. I knew I'd work until 2. I did not read, I think, and even as president, I was a pretty busy guy.
Remember Toby Keith, all about me, all about I, all about number one, oh my, me, my, what I think, what I know, what I want, what I don't want to see. I like talking about you usually. Every once in a while, I want to talk about me. Here's a reaction. The host of Newt's World Podcast, former Speaker of the House, Fox News contributor, Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, good to see you. I want to start with, I see you smiling. I want to start with this party. I won't go through the list I gave Kevin McCarthy. You know, stack the Supreme Court, get rid of the Electoral College, abortion during labor and after labor. I mean, then the new Green Deal. You get it.
Well, first of all, I think we should remember that the I, me president presided over the collapse of his own party. They lost more state legislative seats, governorships, control of the U.S. House, control of the Senate. In a sense, that's because in the end, while Barack Obama loved Barack Obama, the country sort of wanted somebody to actually deliver something. And so literally, he presided over the biggest collapse in the Democratic Party in modern times. But because of the news media, of course, you'd never quite know that. I think the most revealing thing is what's happening on this whole idea of reparations. And I think we should take it seriously in a very positive way of allowing the Democrats to explain exactly who would get reparations. How would you determine? How far back would you go? Would Elizabeth Warren be eligible for 1,372nd part? If you think about it, you have to have somebody who is virtually out of touch with reality to believe that in this extraordinarily complex society, which continues to this day to get mass migration from all over the world, legal migration, by the way, that you could somehow reach out magically and figure out who to give reparations to. This is a perfect Al Sharpton, utterly phony issue, but it tells you the decay of the Democratic Party, that he now has presidential candidates thrilled to go see him to tell him that they would sign a bill this crazy.
Let me ask you, you see what's happening at the border. One of the reasons I believe it's happening at this time, at this level, is because they know if they get in the country, once they're here, they're not getting thrown out. And we had a court ruling earlier tonight. But also, it's interesting, while everybody's been arguing about the border, the president's been repairing and building the wall, and they weren't able to override his veto. The Defense Department has already allocated and identified $9 billion to complete the wall. And I think the people coming know that this is probably their last shot.
Well, I think that's part of it. I think the other part, though, you touched on a minute ago. You know, the president ought to give a speech in which he goes through every single federal court decision that has crippled the U.S. government in dealing with immigration, and then he should announce that on behalf of fairness, we're going to open up centers next to each of those judges' personal homes, and we'll be glad to ship as many people who are here illegally as they would like. And some of those, I'm sure some of the Ninth Circuit Court judges would be thrilled to have 500 illegal immigrants in the house next to them. But this whole idea of these judges who capriciously exercise their liberalism at no cost then no cost to them personally, no cost to them professionally. And I think that the president ought to take that head on.
Last question, real quick, we're running out of time. Your concern, China, their 5G expansion, we're falling behind.
The Defense Innovation Board just came out and said we are losing badly. It may be the first strategic defeat in our competition with China. And if they create a Chinese internet worldwide, we are in very deep trouble.
We better figure out defenses for all the hacking that goes on against our country and our government. Apparently, we keep allowing this to happen. That's why Hillary's server was so bad. Mr. Speaker, great to see you. Congrats on the podcast, as always, and everything you do.
All right, we got new reaction tonight. Democratic 2020 candidates, they are desperate, as we have been saying, to gain some kind of an edge because it's got a field right now, the Democratic Party, of, well, a lot, shall we say. A lot of people, and you got about a dozen of them right now that are just moving further and further and further left as we speak tonight. And in the process, they are making promises they very likely can't keep, many of them now vowing to make nationwide voting rights for incarcerated felons, in prison, as well as reparations, because anybody who has, I guess, any African-American descent is somehow now worthy of some kind of payout left over from the Civil War days. They want to make that a reality. Watch.
In your home state of Vermont, that incarcerated people are allowed to vote.
Yes.
Would you commit to that idea? Would you commit to that on a nationwide scale?
I think that is absolutely the direction we should go.
I firmly support Congresswoman Jackson Lee's bill to create a commission to study reparations.
I believe having good faith conversations about repairing for past harm in our country in the context of reparations is really important.
Would you sign the bill for reparations?
Yes, I would.
Okay, joining me right now, conservative author and speaker David Harris Jr. and former Hillary Clinton campaign advisor Antoine Seawright. Good to see both. David, starting with you. Reparations? Really? That's now where we're going to win 2020? Does it work?
It shows absolutely how desperate they are. I mean, I think it's kind of a Trojan horse too, Trish, because if we're going to start talking about reparations, it should lead to the question, who would pay those reparations? What lineage? What families? And that would point back to the Democrats. They were the ones that pushed for segregation. They're the ones that fought against civil rights. They were the party of slavery. They were the party of the KKK. So while I do think they're actually just pandering to the black community, which again, with empty promises that they never delivered to the black community, if they were going to deliver, then that's exactly who should pay for it.
Antoine, you're shaking your head. You disagree with David. Why?
Well, it's just frustrating because I think sometimes people forget the history of the fact that this country was built on the backs of African Americans. Now, as it relates to the conversation about reparations, I cannot put value on what my sharecropping grandparents or great-grandparents or even the slavery that some of my ancestors went through. I don't think I can put a monetary value on that. But what I can work on and what I think some of these candidates should be talking about is how can we change the conversation, change the course going forward? How do we deal with affordable housing? How do we deal with access to health care? How do we deal with raising the wages? How do we change
All right, well, I don't disagree with you on any of that.
For a very long time.
But what you're saying is very different than what we heard on that stage. Reverend Al Sharpton was very clear. You're going to support reparations. Elizabeth Warren says yes. I mean, there was a theme there.
Trish, I support the idea of reparations, but what that looks like looks different for every other person. And the fortunate thing about Antoine Seawright is I'm not a candidate for president in 2020.
All right. David, I got to say, look, first of all, I'm not African American. You are, right? Both of you are. And so I have no real sense of what it's like to be African American. But
Thank you for saying that, Trish.
Yeah, and I would say that there is still racism and sexism that exists in the United States of America today. That said, we have come a long way. We did have an African American president, which is wonderful. And I think that increasingly we are seeing good things. David, you look at the African American unemployment rate right now, and it's at an all-time low. I mean, you look at women's unemployment rate, 3.3%. It hasn't been that low since the early 1950s. And so, again, I know what it's like to be a woman. I know the sexism that exists out there. I don't have a full appreciation for what it's like as an African American, but I would say that we are making a lot of progress. I mean, should I be able to raise my hand and say, look, you know, women have not been treated well. We weren't allowed to vote, you know, so many years ago. Do I deserve a reparation for that? I mean, at what point do we just say, okay, we are making progress? It's the policies. And Antoine, I don't think you and I are totally off on this, because you're talking about policies that would make a difference. It's the policies that we need to basically help groups of people, not a handout from the government.
Trish.
David,
exactly. We don't need a handout.
and then Antoine, you can weigh in.
Yeah, we don't need a handout, and I would agree with Antoine, too, with what he said, except the policies of this current president is actually doing everything that he asked for, that he wanted, that he's talking about. It's what all Americans want. We want more job opportunity. We want job growth. We want jobs in the inner cities. You know, $25 billion has just been committed to the policies through Donald Trump's tax reform bill from private businesses to help inner cities.
Good.
That's going to help all Americans. That's going to help black Americans. So we just need to support what this president's doing and stop trying to pander to the black community and talk about things that really just bring up more reasons for division and divisiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I just worry, Antoine, there's a danger here. The policies of the past have really done nothing but keep a lot of minority groups in this country down, as opposed to raising them up into a position where they can really, truly help themselves and their families.
Well, Trish, there are a lot of policies that's currently being advocated that would send people of color full steam backwards, starting with voting rights and the fact that people want to take away the rights of votes for minorities. And you look at some of the things going on, particularly
people are trying to take away voting rights from minorities right now.
It would actually blow a hole. It would blow a hole in minorities' communities. Absolutely, it would. I mean, where have you been? Have you been living under a rock for the past several years?
That goes
Voter
back
suppression is a real thing in this country.
Saying that black folks don't all have IDs, so voter ID laws shouldn't exist. That's just
Dude,
ridiculous.
I know it's cute. I know it's cute to come on the network. I know it's cute to come on the network and say crazy things for clickbait. But you're crazy as hell to think that voter suppression is not real in our community. Like, you are really crazy as hell to say that. Look at Stacey Abrams' race. Look at some of these instances going on around the country. Look at right here in South Carolina.
Look at all the fraud that took place in all those races.
Well, this unfortunately is
took place in all those races.
This is moving sideways here, but, you know, look, I think, David, I'm with you. I don't think it's asking too much to have people show up with an ID when they go to vote. I always used to bring my ID in New York thinking that somebody was going to ask for it. They never did. It was weird. All right, David, Antoine, thank you so much. Good to see you guys.
Thank you,
we'll keep it going.
Thank you so much.